For more now on the significance of the Federal Reserve's two-day policy meeting, we are joined by Ted Rossman. Ted is a senior industry analyst at Bankrate. Ted, good to see you again. Thanks for taking time to chat.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Okay, I want to talk first about Lisa Cook's position on the Board of Governors. We know she's there, so what happens next?
It's really up to the courts at this point. Specifically, the Supreme Court is likely where this is going to go. She will be a voting member at this week's meeting. Now, of course, the president has been very vocal about his desire for more Republicans on the board. Lower interest rates, definitely something that he's targeting. Now, it seems that the Fed is going to lower rates by a quarter point this week. Seems like another quarter point cut could be in the offing next month, and then another one in December. So even the current makeup of the Fed seems to be coming around to lower interest rates, but the president's definitely looking to reshape the Fed in ways that we really haven't seen before.
Let's talk more about the makeup of the board. Expectations for Moran's first meeting. How might his presence affect this month's discussions? Now, regardless of what people said, I mean, here's someone who professes he wants Fed independence. But legions of people out there are saying he's Trump's guy. He is going to be there to push Trump's agenda. And it's difficult to argue.
I don't think his presence at this meeting shifts the balance a whole lot. It seems that lower rates are coming one way or the other. Now, a quarter point's not going to make a huge difference in the grand scheme of things. It's more about the path forward. I mean, the president has said that he would like the federal funds rate to be 3 points lower than it is. I mean, that would be a cumulative shift that would have a big difference. It may take years to get there, if we get there. The main point, though, is Fed independence is important because the Fed has this dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices. And the feeling among many investors is that if the Fed loses its independence, it may lose its credibility in the inflation fight. And the irony is that while the Fed controls short-term rates, longer-term borrowing rates are set by Treasury investors. And if there's a feeling that the Fed's not that independent or not that serious about fighting inflation, long-term rates could actually go up. And that would have really the counter effect to what would be intended. So that could lead to higher government borrowing costs, could lead to higher mortgage rates. The short-term rate set by the Fed, that's more likely to affect your savings account, your credit card, your home equity line of credit. Longer-term rates like mortgage rates and treasuries, those are set by investors.
Yeah, Ted, and I guess I should have been more clear because I'm curious what you think about Moran being the first person, and Trump's going to clearly have chances to appoint many more people as his term goes on. So how might this makeover by Trump and his administration affect the Fed's approach? Are you concerned it's going to lose its independent nature?
Well, that is one of the fears potentially. And like I said, that could lead to higher long-term rates, even if the desire from President Trump is to have lower short-term and, he'd also like lower long-term rates as well. Now, all of a sudden, there could be a lot of turnover at the Fed because, we already had this one vacancy. Cook could be another one. Jerome Powell's term as Fed chair expires next spring. He's surely going to be replaced. So, that right there is a big shift. And there are a number of candidates being jockeyed about for that Fed chair position. But the closer we get to that spring deadline, there's already been some ideas floated about a so-called shadow Fed chair, somebody that may be the Fed chair in waiting, who could have influence on markets just by what they say and do.
Wow.
So we could be in for a pretty interesting few months here.
Let's talk about, Powell's been very clear. He said all along, information, data is what's going to drive him and his decisions making. But there are concerns about U.S. economic data, its accuracy. And I hate to ask this because, Trump was furious about a bad jobs number last month, and he fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, it's kind of stunning to even broach this, but what happens if the administration cooks the numbers? I have no reason to believe that's going to happen, but there are concerns out there.
Well, yeah, I mean, that would be a concern. I mean, even this week, the president was talking about upending the traditional practice of companies doing quarterly earnings reports and issuing guidance. I mean, these are sort of uncharted waters. Now, it's not really up to him individually whether or not that happens, but, there are some questions about transparency, and there are political appointees at the head of some of these agencies, but there are also a lot of career government workers who are the ones gathering the statistics. And, remember recently we had that big revision. It was almost 1 million jobs supposedly miscounted and basically lost over the past year. Now, that sounds like a lot. To be fair, a similar number happened last
Right.
year in the final year of the Biden administration, and it's a big country. We're talking big numbers. I mean, that worked out to less than 1% margin of error. So, some of this, it sort of depends how you look at it, but increasingly everything's being viewed through political colored glasses. And if you're on one side of the aisle, you see it one way, and if you're on the other, you see it a completely different way. Organizations like the Fed used to be outside of that. It's one of the reasons why Jerome Powell often wears a purple tie, that
Yeah.
it's the blend of red and blue. He's trying to be neutral. That's definitely been called into question.
Ted, one final question here. What do you expect tomorrow? Not just what they're going to do, but what they're going to say. And are you confident that this Fed board right now is driven by information and is not bowing to pressure from the administration?
I'm sure that Jerome Powell will be firm about that. The most interesting part of the press conference will likely be the path forward. A quarter-point cut this week seems essentially assured. But what happens next? What kind of clues does he give for October, December, perhaps beyond that? I'm sure he'll talk about data dependency, but I'm sure there'll be questions about tariffs and the impacts there on prices and what's going on with the job market. I mean, the unemployment rate has gone up considerably from its lows, but it's actually still pretty low in the grand scheme of things. It was just exceptionally low a few years ago. So sometimes we have these kind of counterbalancing kind of factors. Overall, the economy is still in pretty good shape, and that's why the Fed's going to say that they can remove some of the restriction. But it remains to be seen what happens next. There are a lot of variables, a lot of balls in the air. So I feel like the reading of the tea leaves of what comes next is probably going to be most interesting.